It's the morning of Thursday, January 4th, 2007, and the Campus Crossings apartments in Durham, North Carolina are quiet.
Most of the co-eds are still away enjoying their holiday break, but not Danita Smith. She is hard at work, as usual.
She's a grad student studying journalism and photography, and she's attracted some impressive professional offers already.
There's very little that can deter this 25-year-old dynamo from reaching her goals.
But before Danita can reach any of her goals, in fact, before she can even reach the bottom of the stairs, she is stopped dead, literally in her tracks. Someone has fired a shot into the back of Danita's head.
A brutal gunshot wound at close proximity leaves her no chance of survival. Danita lays motionless on the ground.
All that drive, perseverance, and promise snuffed out in seconds. It makes absolutely no sense.
A grad student, ruthlessly assassinated outside her home over the holiday season. It's an unimaginable tragedy and an enduring mystery.
The horrifying truth about who was on the other end of the gun will shock the whole campus and entire city when the killer is brought to justice and the shocking truth is revealed. Charlotte, North Carolina, Queen City. Named after England's Queen Charlotte, the 17th largest city in the United States is known for its southern charm, low cost of living, and relatively mild climate. As the second largest banking center in the United States after New York City, Charlotte is an important financial hub as well.
Charlotte is also a super fun sports city. It's the birthplace of NASCAR. And it's an artistic city too. With more than 20 art galleries, families love it here.
Families, like Sharon Cook and Calvin Lee Smith. The young couple welcomed their daughter Danita Monique into the world on November 20th, 1981.
Danita is a joyful and loving child, and creative. Sharon and Calvin know from a young age that they have a budding artist on their hands.
Danita loves the camera. She sees the world through a lens and captures what she sees with an artist's eye. The camera, a constant companion and friend, is not just a hobby or casual means of expression for Danita. She decides it can be a source of success as well.
Finding a sense of identity in an art form and pursuing excellence in it is a very healthy behavior. Unlike most people her age, Danita has a clear idea of the path she wishes her life to take and isn't afraid to go after it.
Camera in hand, Danita graduates from West Charlotte High School and heads off to North Carolina Central University to earn a BA in English.
Danita loved her schooling and constantly strived for success.
She becomes a full-time master's student of photojournalism and the pride of the Smith household.
It takes a specific type of journalist to be able to tell a story through the use of photos. And Danita had that extra something in her drive to make it a reality.
Friend Ronnie Camille remembers Danita as a person with a lot of kindness, talent, and ambition.
She was one of the first people I met when I came on campus in 2003 and took me under her wing. She was one of those folks that, just so very friendly. Her plan was to get her PhD and return home to North Carolina Central University and teach mass comm journalism.
With all that ambition to become a professor and a successful photographer, Danita also has one more big goal in mind. She wants to become a mother. One day, she plans to have children and a close-knit, loving family of her own.
It's with this life plan in mind that Danita meets handsome Jameer Stroud at college. The two students quickly fall for each other.
I found them to be really typical college couple, really in love, the little things that couples do. And he just seems like a really nice individual.
Danita and Jameer are both intelligent, focused, and magnetic, and their relationship grows. They get a reputation as a power couple. Anything seems possible for these two.
It's so important in a partner that they support your dreams and vice versa. For a motivated young woman like Danita, this is an ideal relationship, and she has no reservations supporting her partner in return.
Danita is a superstar on campus and well respected by her peers. She excels in both journalism and photography and earns a highly coveted fellowship with the New York Times newspaper.
She was one of the first students at NCCU to be part of the New York Times Student Journalism Institute. The program is a 2-week intensive boot camp.
This is a game changer for Danita. The majority of these New York Times Newsroom Fellowship recipients go on with the confidence and credentials to work anywhere in the country or the world.
Danita's grit and determination are already starting to pay off. After her fellowship, she dives headlong into journalism at school.
She's a key player at the university newspaper, the Campus Echo.
Serving North Carolina Central University since 1927. It's an integral paper dealing with all facets of schooling and university life.
Danita had a passion for journalism and photography. She was, at the time when I was at the Campus Echo, when we were both in undergrad, she was a staff photographer, and I think she did a little bit of reporting.
While Danita is passionately involved with her work and her fellow students on campus, Jameer Stroud embarks on his own career in nearby Greensboro.
By that point, he had already graduated from NCCU. He was a police officer in that area.
With Jameer in Greensboro, Danita chooses to remain close to the university at the Campus Crossings apartment complex. While the couple lives apart for now, they know the 60-mile separation is only temporary. They both have the expectation that they will end up together forever.
There's no doubt that long-distance relationships can be difficult, but both Danita and Jameer have the emotional tools that they need to make it work.
Exactly what direction Danita's career will take is up in the air right now. All her friends and family know is that she will push toward greatness. And all Jameer Stroud knows is that he doesn't want to be left behind.
Jameer and Danita have been together for 6 years when he proposes.
Danita Smith enthusiastically accepts. Jameer is the love of her life, and being married brings her one step closer to one of her big life goals, a family.
On top of wanting to get married and have kids, she wants to get her doctorate, work as a professor, and be a journalist. And everything so far is going along just as she plans.
North Carolina Central University is highly respected in the States and country, which helps Danita plan her future.
No one can predict how Danita's trajectory of unlimited promise will take a devastating detour. On the crisp, cold morning of Thursday, January 4th, 2007, Danita Smith is up and preparing for classes, so she'll be more than ready when they resume after the holiday break. She's working on her thesis, and she leaves her campus residence early. She's got a busy day of meetings ahead of her.
Meanwhile, fiancé Jameer Stroud is 60 miles away in Greensboro, working as a police officer.
This should be a normal morning, but there's nothing normal about it.
At approximately 10 a.m., Corey Smith, another resident of the Campus Crossings apartment building, heads off to work and notices someone's belongings scattered on the stairs. Then, at the bottom of the stairs, he sees a woman.
Other than a body at the bottom of the stairs, Corey doesn't see much else and assumes an accident has occurred.
Corey frantically reports to a 911 operator that a person has fallen down the stairs and she's in bad shape. The operator instructs him to check the person's pulse and their ID. The woman, Corey says, is Danita Smith. Corey runs to find the building's maintenance director, Michael Hedgepeth, as the ambulance arrives.
Paramedic Corolla Locke is first on the scene and determines Danita Smith is worse than in bad shape. She's not breathing.
She immediately begins working on Danita in hopes they can bring her back, as survival can be as high as 90% if treatment is started within the first minutes, but drops 10% every minute after.
All the excitement draws the eyes of other tenants in the building. Danita Smith's friend, Edith, receives a phone call from her brother, who also lives at Campus Crossings.
He's curious if Edith had heard from Danita because something is going on at the apartment complex. Edith calls Danita over and over again, but can't get a hold of her. So Edith calls Danita's fiancé, Jameer Stroud, instead.
Jameer is already well aware of what's going on. Danita's fallen down the stairs. She's unconscious, and he's racing to get home from Greensboro to be with her.
Danita's parents are also coming to be with their injured daughter, but they are 3 hours away in Charlotte. No matter how close or far away Danita's loved ones are, it's already too late. 25-year-old Danita Smith is pronounced dead at the scene. However, the cause of death has yet to be determined.
Edith Kearns arrives, and to her shock, she is told her best friend, 25-year-old Danita Smith, didn't survive. She's dead.
Although details aren't released yet, Edith assumes Danita's fall down the stairs must have broken something to cause this fateful outcome.
Jameer Stroud shows up shortly afterwards and learns the same news. He's in shock. He seems calm even, almost in a catatonic state.
When an emotional trauma like this occurs, people can have a wide variety of reactions, ranging from hyper-emotional to the more muted behavior Jameer demonstrates.
The whole university is rocked by the news of such a tragic and senseless accident, and the loss of one of its brightest stars.
The reaction on campus was definitely a shock. Word spread pretty quickly that an NCCU student was involved. And once we found out that it was Danita, it was even more, shocking because, Danita was just a well-liked and well-loved person.
Due to the upsetting events that occurred near the campus, safety protocols are heightened in order to keep everyone calm and safe after the tragedy.
As officials begin to piece together the details, they learn Danita Smith's death is much more sinister than a simple fall down the stairs. This is murder.
Corey Smith, the first person to find Danita, immediately assumes she's fallen and goes for help without knowing she's been shot.
Maintenance Director Michael Hedgepeth quickly connects the dots. 2 hours earlier, at 8:10 a.m., he called 911 himself after hearing what he thought was gunfire. Police came to the campus crossing apartments to investigate, but were unable to locate the source or the location of the sound, and they left.
Could police have saved Danita's life if they'd found her a couple of hours before? And even worse, have they let a killer slip through their fingers? North Carolina Central University is rocked by news of the death of star campus journalist and photographer Danita Smith.
Her stunned friends and family will soon learn that the young student who doesn't have an enemy in the world has been killed.
Police get to work on a forensic examination of the crime scene.
Police comb the area for gunshot residue, ballistic evidence, and any potential DNA or fingerprints that might have been left behind. Unable to find gunshot residue on Danita's hands, it's obvious she didn't commit suicide. Meanwhile, there was a lack of fingerprints at the scene, which didn't help their initial investigation.
Danita's wallet is intact, with cash and cards, ruling out robbery as a motive.
It was obvious the gun that killed her wasn't left behind, but they did find one interesting detail laying on the ground.
Officers are able to obtain a mangled slug from the scene. It's a great piece of evidence, but it will take time to get answers back, and police need to find the killer now. They're hoping eyewitnesses and people close to Danita can provide some information.
Police start by interviewing fiancé Jameer Stroud at the scene.
The first place police are going to look is the partner or spouse. 1 in 3 women have experienced intimate partner violence.
Danita's death was due to a gunshot wound, but forensic specialists also look for bruising on her body. For all they know, this could have been a domestic argument that got out of hand.
But Jameer Stroud is a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. He's been with the Greensboro Police Department for 4 years. He doesn't seem like the type to do this.
Not to mention, Jameer's relationship with Danita has resembled a storybook love, with tremendous positive energy between them. But investigators can't go off of that as hard evidence. Who knows what happened behind closed doors?
Add to that, Jameer says he's at home 60 miles away and asleep at the time of Danita's murder, off duty because he's just worked a night shift. Looks like Jameer Stroud is a dead end.
After his interview, a heartbroken Stroud leaves to return to Greensboro. Next, police want to talk to Michael Hedgepeth, the building maintenance director, who made a 911 call at 8:10 a.m. that same morning.
Hedgepeth tells detectives about hearing the gunshot. He also shares that he did see someone that may be of interest to them. After Hedgepeth hears the shot, he sees a stranger running from the back of the complex. He follows and sees the same person now driving away in a burgundy SUV.
Michael Hedgepeth pulls alongside the vehicle. It's a woman, and she's hysterical.
Turns out, she's heard the gunshot too. She tells Michael she's afraid of guns. The young woman adds that she's staying at the complex in the 1200 building.
Hedgepeth tells the woman to wait where she's parked, and that's when he calls 911 to report the gunfire.
But the woman doesn't wait as she's been instructed. Hedgepeth doesn't see her again.
It's suspicious behavior. If the woman was scared of the gunshot, you would think that she'd welcome the arrival of police and an opportunity to help track down the shooter.
He's able to talk to her, but when asked to describe her afterwards to police, his details are generic, except for one specific piece of information.
When Michael Hedgepeth describes the woman's SUV, police realize it fits the description of an official Greensboro City vehicle.
And who works for the city of Greensboro? Danita Smith's fiancé, Jameer Strood.
It might be a coincidence, but it might also be anything but. So police call Jameer Strood into the station for a talk.
Jameer tells police that he knows a woman named Shannon Crawley, who is a 911 operator in Greensboro, drives a vehicle like that.
He knows her from a training session in 2000 they both took in the police academy. She's a single mother of 2 kids.
Detectives sense something here and push him for more details. Jameer isn't extremely forthcoming, but he's not rude and does answer when asked. And it turns out there is a lot more to tell.
The two run into each other again 4 years later, and this time, Jameer asks for Shannon's phone number. By the end of that year, the relationship turns sexual. Jameer continues to date Durham resident Danita Smith, but 60 miles away in Greensboro, he and Shannon are as domestic as can be, doing errands, keeping house. Shannon even helps Jameer move into his new place.
Then, Shannon gets pregnant. But she has an abortion because, according to her mother, the pregnancy isn't viable.
Either she's referring to her personal situation at the time, or possibly it was a health reason. Regardless, she goes through with the procedure to terminate her pregnancy.
The abortion makes Jameer angry. He phones Shannon's doctor, insisting he back her claim about the non-viability of the abortion.
Jameer has no right to Shannon's decisions regarding her body, but he tries to get involved anyhow.
But of course, the doctor won't reveal Shannon's personal information.
Doctor-client privacy is only broken when medical information is necessary to be shared with others. For example, it is needed to report child abuse or protect someone from harm. In the case of Shannon, none of these were present.
Now that detectives know about the affair and Shannon's abortion, Jameer Strood is an obvious suspect in the death of Danita Smith. But he insists the relationship ended long before her murder.
After the abortion, Jameer tells police their relationship fizzles out. Although they still speak, the affair is all over and done with, about a year before Danita's death.
At this point, police are understandably interested in bringing in Shannon Crawley for an interview. They want her perspective on how it all went down with Jameer Strood. It's possible she'll have a different story.
Shannon engaged in a long-term affair with Jameer, and may not have taken kindly to the relationship going sideways after the abortion.
They track her down at work at the police station in Greensboro.
Detectives learn immediately that Shannon Crawley is a delight. She's a responsible, professional single mother. She's well-liked and respected by her employers.
Shannon backs up everything Jameer says about the relationship, including the end, when the pregnancy is terminated, and they call it quits.
Shannon said she knew about Danita, but it was neither here nor there, and she's never owned a gun. She added she also doesn't believe Jameer is capable of murder.
Finally, Shannon provides an alibi. At the time of the murder, she was taking one of her children to the pediatrician.
Police have unearthed an old hidden affair. But like the relationship, this hot lead fizzles out and doesn't go anywhere.
Or does it? As officers wrap up their day with little to go on, thinking their investigation is back at zero, they receive a message. One of Shannon Crawley's co-workers has a piece of information he thinks they might want to hear. On January 4th, 2007, 25-year-old university student Danita Smith is mercilessly shot in her North Carolina campus apartment block over the holiday break. Police learned Danita's fiancé had cheated on her, but that seemingly hot trail leads nowhere. Then, they receive a call.
A colleague from Shannon's 911 office comes forward and tells police that Shannon has been getting disturbing personal calls from Jameer Stroud for months.
Shannon tells her coworker that she's afraid for her life. This coworker says he's so afraid for Shannon that he sells her a .38 caliber handgun for protection, and he teaches her how to shoot it.
But Shannon Crawley, just minutes before, has told police she doesn't own a gun and is in fact afraid of guns. Something's not adding up here.
Police investigators understand that when a suspect lies about anything, it's a huge red flag, that not only are they comfortable with lying, but they must have a reason to do so.
It's not uncommon for someone in North Carolina to own a gun, but when someone is shot to death and they give investigators a story about fearing guns, this could be a good lead.
Investigators will need to talk to both Shannon Crawley and Jameer Stroud again. Jameer denies ever harassing Shannon in the workplace and emphasizes she would have no reason to fear him. Plus, Jameer is happily moving on in his life. He wants nothing to do with his former lover.
But Jameer does have a surprising comment for police. When asked, he states that he believes Shannon Crawley is capable of murder.
Sweet Shannon Crawley? The devoted single mother and respected 911 operator who charmed police in her interview? Police had thought this affair was a dead end, but it's looking more and more like a live wire after all.
Shannon Elizabeth Crawley is 27 years old at the time of Danita's murder. She works hard, saves her money, and even manages to buy a home for her family all on her own.
To accomplish all these things, Shannon Crawley would have to be an independent, resilient woman. But sometimes, behind a polished exterior,
maybe a woman who's been pushed past her limits.
Law enforcement looks at two avenues when investigating a murder. The physical evidence is always important, but so is the evidence surrounding close relationships, because they can be just as strong at times.
So while Danita Smith is in Durham planning her life with Love Jameer, he and Shannon Crawley happily carry on in Greensboro.
Until Shannon gets pregnant.
Pregnancies can be a stressful discovery at the best of times. But in this situation, there was the added pressure of the fact that Jameer and Shannon were engaged in a secret affair.
According to Jameer, he makes it clear to Shannon his long-term future is not with her. He tells her in no uncertain terms, "I don't want to have a baby with you."
That's a devastating blow to any young woman pregnant with her boyfriend's child.
Shannon terminates the pregnancy and the relationship ends.
This gives investigators two contrasting explanations over the abortion. First is Shannon explaining it's not viable. And second, Jameer advising them he broke it off with her and she had an abortion out of personal choice.
But it's not the last Jameer sees of Shannon Crawley.
In September or October of 2006, Shannon purchases a house moments from Jameer's home. She also starts to attend Jameer's church.
She is making very strong moves toward being near to him, and this may not be welcome. Is Shannon Crawley stalking Jameer Stroud?
Jameer says he asks for help from a friend in the Internal Affairs Department, complaining that Shannon keeps calling him night and day, that she won't let the relationship die.
But police have information from a colleague of Shannon's that she is the one on the receiving end of disturbing phone calls, that she's afraid for her life. So, who is stalking who here?
Now caught in a game of he said, she said, detectives need to determine who is telling the truth.
Then, in mid-December 2006, Jameer takes Danita to his church in Greensboro. The couple is dressed to the nines, and Danita is proudly showing off her diamond engagement ring to everyone there.
There's a report that Shannon is in church that day too, and sees with her own eyes not only her rival for Jameer's affections, but that the couple has become engaged.
Danita Smith's innocent visit to church in Greensboro could be the match in the powder keg.
If Shannon was hoping to rekindle her romance with Jameer, this would have been a devastating moment for her, and possibly traumatic enough to spur her to do something desperate and violent.
Things are now starting to come into focus a little bit clearer for police.
Love triangles and jealousy are a strong piece of evidence when investigating a murder.
But a few key pieces of information are still threatening to seriously cloud the investigation. Namely, Jameer and Shannon are pointing the finger at each other as the unhinged stalker after their relationship ends.
The only thing detectives know is certain: one or both of them is lying. It's late 2006, and unknown to Danita Smith, her fiancé, Jameer Stroud, is picking up the pieces of a messy affair in a nearby town.
25-year-old Danita proudly shows off her engagement ring to friends at church, possibly unknowingly showing her hand to Jameer's ex, Shannon Crawley.
Jameer Stroud has been living parallel lives, and although the relationship with Shannon is over, if Danita Smith ever found out that Jameer had been seeing another woman, she would have ended the relationship in a heartbeat.
Danita had a lot of self-respect, not to mention professional ambitions and a fast track to a successful career. Jameer had everything to lose.
3 weeks later, on January 4th, 2007, Danita Smith is shot to death in the stairwell of her Durham apartment building.
It's a perfect location to murder someone outside without being seen. They knew it was concealed and that they could get away.
Jameer denies any involvement in the murder of his fiancée.
There were no indication that anything worrisome in the days or weeks before Danita's death. The last time I saw Danita, she was extremely happy.
Jameer's colleague and former lover, 911 dispatcher Shannon Crawley, also denies knowing Danita Smith or having anything to do with her death.
But Shannon has lied before about owning a gun. There's no reason to believe she wouldn't lie again.
She also says she's never been to Durham, where Danita lives.
Police are starting to suspect that what Shannon Crawley says and what Shannon Crawley does are two very different things.
Investigators already know that a burgundy SUV seen by eyewitness Michael Hedgepeth at the crime scene is a Greensboro city vehicle, the same kind of vehicle driven by Shannon Crawley.
Although the description of the female he bumped into was somewhat vague to police, they're adamant the burgundy SUV was there.
The police obtain a warrant for Shannon's house and truck, as well as her phone records.
Cell phones transmit signals, regardless of whether a call has been made or not. And when law enforcement uses cell tower triangulation, they're able to locate where the cell phone is based on the ping it sends back.
Police track Shannon Crawley's pings and learn she is in Durham on the day before and the date of Danita's murder, despite her claims she's never been there.
Her cell phone pings off a tower a quarter-mile away from the Campus Crossings apartments. Police check Jameer Stroud's pings, too. Only towers located around Greensboro pinged for him. With cell phone records placing her near the scene of the crime, the walls are starting to close in on Shannon Crawley as investigators continue their search for any evidence linking her to the murder of Danita Smith.
Police scour Shannon's car. Her steering wheel comes back as positive for gunshot residue.
But this is a city vehicle, and conceivably signed out by other employees.
The slug found at the crime scene holds some promise, but it's severely mangled, so all forensics can determine is that it has enough weight to be from a .38 caliber round.
Despite its condition, it is identifiable as a .38 caliber slug. That's all police need to know to connect it to the gun Shannon purchased from her coworker. Police have a lot of circumstantial evidence piling up against Shannon Crawley at this point, but no smoking gun. Is it enough to convince a jury?
They need to speak to Shannon Crawley again, and they need to penetrate that poised exterior.
It's difficult cracking someone who is as good as lying as Shannon. She has almost gotten away with several lies so far, with only chance pieces of evidence tipping off investigators.
If Shannon Crawley really is obsessed with Jameer Stroud, obsessed enough to kill his fiancée in cold blood, maybe she'll reveal herself.
But first, police will have to find her. Compelling evidence is mounting against Shannon Crawley in the January 2007 shooting death of 25-year-old rising star Danita Smith. And though they don't have definitive proof that Shannon Crawley pulled the trigger, police are ready to make a move.
Officers don't know where Shannon is, though. She's not at her Greensboro home, and she's not at her job as a 911 dispatcher.
Police finally catch up to Shannon at her sister's house in Greensboro.
And on January 9th, 2007, 5 days after Danita Smith is gunned down, Shannon Crawley is arrested for the murder of Danita Smith.
So, from the time Danita was murdered until the time Shannon Crawley was arrested and charged was really a short time.
As Shannon's being led out of her sister's house, her kids watching there, she says to her family, "Raise them like they're your own." But otherwise, she's calm as officers cuff her and take her away.
Shannon is calm, but she doesn't realize all the evidence police have against her. Although it's circumstantial, it's still relevant.
News of the arrest travels lightning fast, especially at North Carolina Central University, where Danita Smith worked for the university paper, the Campus Echo.
I remember vividly the day it came down that Crawley was charged and arrested. I think we found out at 8:45, and I said, "Hey, we need to get a story up online immediately. Our friend is dead, and this is breaking. It's already announced. The other major news orgs are doing it. People are looking to us. We need to get the story out."
Shannon is a 27-year-old mother who has never once been in trouble with the law before, but she's cool as a cucumber in the interrogation room.
When she settles in, Shannon Crawley is eager to share a detail that she wants authorities to know.
Shannon assures police she did not kill Danita Smith, but she says they'd better find out exactly where Jameer Stroud is at the time of his fiance's murder.
She's calm, confident, cocky even. Under these circumstances, it leads officers to wonder just what else she might know.
Meanwhile, Danita Smith is laid to rest.
It should have been a wedding, but instead, it's standing room only to say goodbye to Danita Smith. She lays in a casket at University Park Baptist Church and is to be interred at Charlotte Memorial Gardens.
An entire busload of students from North Carolina Central University make the trip to pay respects to their friend and fellow student.
Danita Smith was just a joy, and she was a proud sister, a proud NCCU Eagle, a proud just sorority member.
Compounding the grief is the potential that Danita had and the many positive relationships that she had built.
While friends and family grieve the loss of Danita Smith, Shannon Crawley reveals that the day before the murder, she and Jameer had a fight.
She says he's acting erratically and is furious that she broke up with him. At 5 a.m., Jameer tells her either she will die or her kids will die. She can save them if she comes with him.
Shannon agrees, and they get into her vehicle and drive 60 miles to the Campus Crossings apartment complex in Durham. He takes her keys and leaves her there.
Shannon says she waits in the car until she hears an argument. She gets out of the car and approaches the apartment building to hear what's happening.
She hears a gunshot and sees Jameer running towards the SUV.
Stroud, he hides in the back seat while Shannon drives. Maintenance supervisor Michael Hedgepeth approaches the car, but Jameer tells her to drive off.
That's when Hedgepeth first calls 911.
This is a huge revelation, and what's more, it's plausible. Is it possible Shannon Crawley is just another victim in this twisted and tragic plot? Police are investigating the January 2007 murder of 25-year-old Danita Smith. And person of interest, Shannon Crawley, has just dropped a bombshell. While her story of her ex-boyfriend, Jameer Stroud, being the real shooter makes sense, there's still a few holes in Shannon's story police need her to fill in.
For one, detectives want to know why she claims to not own a gun when she'd purchased one from her coworker.
Shannon says she only owned it for a few hours. She says she threw the gun and ammunition into 2 different dumpsters right after purchasing it.
Investigators are intrigued. Shannon tells a compelling story that points to Jameer Stroud as the killer.
While they still harbor their suspicion about Shannon's story, it's the closest police have to painting a picture of what happened to Danita Smith.
While there's not enough evidence to support Shannon's claims against Jameer, there is enough against her. Shannon Crawley is officially charged with the first-degree murder of Danita Smith.
They looked at all the evidence and realized that Shannon Crawley was, in fact, the person that shot Danita.
She's released on a $175,000 bond until her trial.
It's not uncommon for law enforcement to bring someone up on murder charges if they only have circumstantial evidence, but they need to be sure it's strong enough in court.
Shannon Crawley's father, Keith, a former deputy sheriff himself, is devastated by the news. His daughter is being accused of murder, and he has a theory of his own of what's happening.
Keith Crawley firmly believes that because Jameer Stroud is a police officer, no one is looking at him as hard as they should be.
He thinks they're making Shannon an easy target, when Jameer is the guilty one.
It's all a tangled web of love, lies, and betrayal, and there are no clear answers. Now it will be up to a jury to unravel and try to get to the truth. Shannon Crawley's trial begins on February 8, 2010, in Durham County Superior Court. The Honorable Judge Ronald Stevens presiding.
The basic facts of the case are not disputed. Danita Smith was shot in the head on the stairs outside her apartment building, and prosecutors present a pretty clear-cut case outlining Shannon Crawley as the killer.
According to the prosecution, Shannon Crawley has an affair with Jameer Stroud. After a terminated pregnancy and the end of the illicit relationship, she won't let it end. She buys a house beside him and joins his church.
While none of these choices are crimes, it does imply an unhealthy obsession with reigniting a relationship with Jameer.
But when she sees Jameer there with his fiancée 2 weeks before the murder, Shannon Crawley hatches a cold-blooded plan. She stalks and shoots her rival, Danita Smith, to death in a jealous rage.
Dr. Cynthia Gardner, a forensic pathologist, testifies that Danita is killed by a distant-range gunshot wound to the head. The caliber of bullet removed from the victim's head could have come from the revolver Shannon purchased, a .38 caliber.
There is gun residue on the steering wheel of the vehicle Crawley drives, and cell phone records place her at Danita's residence the night before and the day of the murder.
That's the story prosecution tells the jury, and it seems pretty airtight. Next, it's time for Shannon Crawley to tell her story.
And when she does, Shannon Crawley shocks the courtroom and shares new information that points directly to Jameer Stroud.
Shannon tells the jury that on June 20th, 2008, while she is out on bail, Jameer Stroud stalks and rapes her at knife point.
She says that he cuts her clothes off and holds the knife to her throat, slices her thigh. She says she even needed stitches.
Most damning of all, Shannon said she reported the rape to police. While shocking, Shannon Crawley's accusation is countered with skepticism.
A detective in the sexual assault unit testifies that they investigated Shannon's claim of rape.
At the time of the alleged rape, Jameer's cell phone records show he would have had to drive 120 miles per hour without stopping for red lights from his location to commit the crime.
Furthermore, even though there are lacerations to Shannon's neck and thigh, the rape kit is negative.
The story of the alleged rape looks like a fabrication, a frame-up by a murder suspect desperate to deflect blame. Finally, as the case wraps up, the prosecution has a surprise of their own.
The prosecution has obtained audio tapes that Shannon Crawley's defense team decided not to use.
The defense quickly tries to stop the tapes being played and motions for a mistrial, but the judge allows it.
These audio recordings are of a confession that Shannon claimed she'd secretly recorded of Jameer Stroud confessing to the crime.
Jurors are intrigued, and the whole courtroom listens closely. On the tape, a voice whispers that they killed Danita Smith. However, it quickly becomes apparent why Shannon Crawley's attorneys tried to suppress the recordings.
The alleged voice is far higher than the deep voice of Jameer Stroud. It's like someone, likely a woman, trying to disguise themselves to sound like someone else.
It's shocking that someone would go to such lengths over a failed relationship. But Shannon's actions add up to a spurned lover who wants revenge in any way she can get it.
The jury deliberates for 7 hours over the course of 2 days. On March 2nd, 2010, Shannon Crawley is found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in the shooting death of 25-year-old Danita Smith.
Shannon Crawley is now spending a life-term sentence in prison. Her children are growing up without a mother.
While the punishment is for Shannon Crawley, Superior Court Judge Ronald Stevens has some choice words for Jameer Stroud as well. He says Jameer Stroud caused a perfect storm to happen and then walked away from it, and that was unfortunate for everyone in this case. Danita's mother, Sharon Smith, is relieved this nightmare is finally over, but she spares no sympathy for the woman who snuffed out her daughter's hopes and dreams and took her away forever. She tells her, "Someday, I may forgive you, but I don't right now. I hope you rot in hell."
The trauma will take perhaps a lifetime to heal, but at least Danita's mother has the satisfaction of knowing that Shannon faced justice and can no longer harm anyone in the community.
There have been so many lives affected by this tragedy. Danita's not coming home, ever. Danita's not gonna be, she'll never have that opportunity to impact the lives of students. Her family has this hole in their heart that will never be filled.
In the wake of this tragedy, the newsroom of the Campus Echo has been renamed.
Today, the Campus Echo newsroom is named after Danita Monique Smith. It is the Danita Monique Smith newsroom. That is the one thing as editor that I wanted to get done to make sure that there was a long-lasting legacy and that no one would forget.
The promising young journalist who dreamed of making headlines ends up on the front page in the saddest and most devastating of ways.
But her memory and her own story will continue to live on and bring joy to the ones that were so close to her. It's 6 p.m. on Monday, April 26, 2009, in Snellville, Georgia, and Heather Allen Strube is waiting in a Target store parking lot.
Heather is only 25 years old, and she runs a successful floral business in nearby Conyers.
Described as sweet and kind, Heather has the unique ability to make everyone around her feel comfortable and welcome, gifts she lovingly shares with her customers. She's even in the midst of earning her business degree to ensure her flower shop is a success.
Most days she has her 1.5-year-old son Carson right there with her, and it makes her job even more perfect.
Today, she must go to Snellville to pick up Carson from her soon-to-be ex-husband. Heather and Stephen recently separated, but due to their mutual love for their son, they are committed to co-parenting and being good parents to Carson.
It's a routine handoff, in keeping with their current custody agreement, and as usual, it seems to go smoothly.
Until something unexpected happens. Heather Strube is shot dead in front of her child. What happened to Heather is a mystery that will take 2 years to solve.
The violent and unprovoked attack shocks the entire community.
I just can't believe she went out the way she did, you know. She didn't deserve to go out like that.
But there's something that really sticks out, something most people would overlook.
When all regular avenues of investigation are exhausted, law enforcement will focus on one strange detail to ensure a vicious killer is caught for their horrific crime. Snellville is a city in Gwinnett County, Georgia, with a population of roughly 18,000 in 2009.
The town slogan is Snellville, where everybody is somebody. It's basically a suburb of Atlanta and is part of the Atlanta metropolitan area, roughly 33 miles east of downtown.
Nearby Conyers is a little smaller, but is home to close to 15,000 people.
It's named after a local banker and director of the railroad named W.D. Conyers, who paid $700 for the land and deeded it to the railroad.
The heart and soul of the city is Old Town Conyers, a historic district filled with great restaurants, shops, and tourist destinations. It's in Conyers that Heather Allen Strube runs a successful florist business. It was a happy accident that Heather got into the floral industry, but she's found her passion as a florist.
Heather loves her job and manages to keep working in spite of being the primary caregiver for a young child. In fact, she's figured out ways to bring her son to the shop with her. She has play areas set up, which are safe places for her son to be while she's working. She also likes to keep him in a stroller right next to her when she's at the counter.
But today, 1.5-year-old Carson is with his father, Stephen. Heather will be picking him up after work.
Those who know Heather say she is a kind, loving person, a smart businesswoman, and a wonderful mother. In spite of her recently failed marriage, she's a young woman who appears to have it all.
Heather Suzanne Allen was born on April 20th, 1980, to proud parents Buddy and Mary Allen. Heather fills her parents' lives with so much joy and love. With 2 brothers, Heather is the little girl her parents always dreamed of having. She's the perfect addition to their family.
Heather is an amazing child, full of the spirit of love and friendship and happiness. She's someone who other people want to be around. She loves being active, she's a Girl Scout, and she loves dancing. She just enjoys life.
Her love of dance may be what leads Heather to become a cheerleader as a teenager.
While some might be tempted to call her an extrovert, Heather also has a more guarded side. You have to earn her trust, but once she gets to know you, you'll be a friend for life.
She was the most nicest, most special, loving person that I've ever known in my life, you know, in my childhood life, you know.
Buddy and Mary Allen are rooted in faith, and they raise their kids to be as well.
While participating in a church youth group, Heather meets a boy named Stephen Strube, and they get along really well. Eventually, they start to date.
I do remember meeting Stephen a lot. He looked like a really good guy.
Wanting to have some spending money, Heather gets a part-time job working as a florist. Much to her surprise, Heather finds that she loves the job. She even decides she wants to become a florist when she grows up. As much as Heather loves her new job, she loves her boyfriend Stephen more. So, after finishing high school, she decides to go to Auburn University in Alabama to be closer to him. And like any good church-going young couple, in May of 2004, Heather and Stephen get married.
Well, it's been a long time since I've been to a wedding. The last wedding I went to was that one. Heather's wedding, you know. That was a very fun experience I got to be a part of. My family, my mom, my sister, and my brother took part in her and Stephen's wedding, and it was a really awesome, fun experience there.
It's not long before Heather gets a chance to return to her first love, flowers. A nice shop in a neighboring community is up for sale, and Heather's mom, Mary, buys it. The 2 women become the proud new owners of Flowers of Old Town in Conyers. As if Heather's life didn't seem perfect already, in September of 2007, she gives birth to a son, Carson. Heather loves being a mother more than anything in the world.
Heather now has a third big love in her life, and Carson becomes the center of her world.
I think that from that time when how great she was with kids and wonderful she was, that was a bit of a sign there that she was going to be a great mother from the get-go. And she kind of showed that when she got Carson.
Returning to work after giving birth is challenging for any new mother, and adjusting to long hours away from her child is difficult. But luckily, Heather finds a way to ease the transition.
When she goes back to work, Heather makes sure her baby boy is always by her side.
An attentive and loving husband, Stephen caters to the needs of his wife and new child.
Stephen, who works in construction, builds play areas in the flower shop so the baby will be entertained but safe.
Not long after returning to work, Heather receives an unexpected visitor.
Stephen's mother, Joanna Hayes, offers to help out around the shop. This surprises Heather, perhaps because her mother-in-law has never been overly friendly to her. They're not close. And Heather is not alone in that feeling.
Heather's parents, Buddy and Mary, also feel that they just don't click with Joanna and her husband. Even though Heather and her family don't particularly care for Joanna, she is Carson's grandma. And she really seems to love her grandson. She may talk about helping out in the shop or saving Heather money on childcare, but it's obvious to Heather that Joanna actually just wants to spend time with Carson.
As reassuring as a grandmother's love can be, all the extra attention starts to get in the way for Heather.
It seems like Joanna is always wanting to take Carson out of the store, presumably to give her daughter-in-law a break. But Heather isn't comfortable with that. She even finds herself having to get tough with Joanna to prevent her from wandering off with the child.
It's frustrating and socially awkward for Heather, but at the end of the day, it's hard to be angry at someone who just wants to shower your baby with love.
Around Valentine's Day 2008, something more troubling happens.
Her ever-present mother-in-law, Joanna, hands Heather a receipt from the jewelry store and tells her it must be a gift from Stephen. Heather is confused because Stephen hasn't given her any jewelry.
When Heather asks Stephen about it, her fears are confirmed. Stephen has been having an affair. It's only been 5 months since Carson was born, and they've been the happiest months of Heather's life. But all that is ripped away with the discovery of her husband's cheating. Even still, she wants to make it work for their son.
Stephen agrees to counseling with Heather. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. In spite of Heather's extraordinary maturity and willingness to forgive Stephen, the couple ultimately decide to split in June of 2008.
By April of 2009, the difficult process of getting a divorce is almost complete.
The biggest issue in cases like this is often the custody of the child. In this case, Heather is the main caregiver, and Stephen is allowed to take him every other weekend.
To avoid any undue stress or awkwardness, they agree to do the handoff in a neutral place, the parking lot of a box store in Snellville.
Snellville is halfway between Conyers, where 25-year-old Heather works and lives with her parents, and Lilburn, where Stephen lives with his mother and stepfather. It's a reasonable compromise.
It's pretty straightforward. They each pull up in separate vehicles, one of them hands Carson to the other, and they both drive off again. They've done it so many times over the past year or so, and it's always gone off without a hitch.
The divorce isn't quite finalized, so neither of them want to do anything to make themselves look bad to the judge.
So on April 29th, 2009, it's all business as usual. Heather arrives in the Snellville parking lot just before 6 p.m. and patiently waits.
Stephen arrives in his car and brings Carson to Heather.
As Stephen drives away, it seems just like every other handoff.
Heather puts her son into the back seat of her car and doesn't notice that someone is approaching her from behind.
According to witnesses, she turns around and is surprised to see a very odd-looking man in front of her. He's not very tall, and he has wild dark hair and a big mustache.
Heather briefly wonders what this stranger wants with her, but she quickly decides it's time to leave.
She tries to get in her car, but the man stops her.
Unable to drive off, she starts to back away from him, perhaps trying to lead him away from her car and her son.
The man reaches into a black bag and pulls something out.
A single shot rings out, startling other shoppers in the parking lot.
Someone calls 911, but it's too late. Heather Ellen Strube is dead. With a gunshot wound to the head, she lies crumpled beside her car. Once a loving and vibrant mother, now a selfless murder victim.
The murder is a brutal, random attack in a public place. And there's no sign of the suspect. He's officially at large. The whole community could be in danger, so police know they need to find him fast before he disappears for good or does this again.
On April 29, 2009, in Snellville, Georgia, soon-to-be divorced mom Heather Ellen Strube takes custody of her son from his father Stephen Strube in a Target store parking lot. Moments later, she is gunned down by a stranger in front of several witnesses.
Yeah, I kind of remember being, shocked by the whole thing, I mean, who would do that?
By the time police arrive, the suspect is gone, Heather is dead, and baby Carson will be without his mother for the rest of his life. The investigative team works fast to try to understand what happened. Investigating this parking lot murder brings unique challenges, as customers have been coming and going since the attack. Police need to lock down the environment as soon as possible to protect any and all evidence.
Forensically speaking, the cause of death is pretty obvious. It's a single gunshot to the head.
The medical examiner can tell from the marks and powder burns on a victim's skin how close the shooter would have to be when pulling the trigger. And in this case, Heather's killer had to be very, very close.
It's a point-blank shot. The gun may have been pressed to her head.
This doesn't sound like any attack. This is an execution.
Poor Carson is sitting just a few feet away when it happens. He's only 18 months old and hopefully doesn't really understand. But if he could talk, he might be able to give investigators some clues.
This brazen daylight attack on a young mother whose child is still strapped in the back seat has investigators scrambling to put two and two together.
The fact that he's still there, strapped into the back seat, rules out kidnapping as a motive.
Investigators also notice that Heather's purse is still in the car, and it appears that nothing has been taken from it. So this doesn't look much like a robbery either.
Police secure the scene and interview witnesses. To the investigators' dismay, few people witnessed the shooting, despite the fact that it occurred out in the open and in broad daylight. Those that did all say the same thing.
Several people describe the suspect as a short, thin, white male wearing khaki pants and a button-up shirt. They also say he has black hair and a mustache.
With just a physical description from witnesses, detectives turn their attention upward, praying for some new information.
The reason Heather and Stephen always meet in this parking lot is because it's a very public place, and it also has security cameras.
In a stroke of good luck, investigators are able to access security footage that shows the Target parking lot.
When they watch the video, they see a person walking toward Heather Strube. A few minutes later, they can see the same person walking away. Unfortunately, the shooting isn't captured, and the man in the disguise, the black hair looks like a wig, and the mustache looks fake.
Putting together everything they know, investigators begin to see this murder as a deliberate and planned action.
The shooter wears a disguise and calmly walks in and out. It almost seems like this is a professional hit.
The motive isn't robbery or kidnapping. It could be the random act of a psychopath.
The fact that the killer wears a disguise, though, suggests he's someone who might be recognized by Heather or other witnesses.
Whenever a married woman is murdered, the first person investigators want to look at is the husband. And when a soon-to-be divorced woman is killed, police usually make a beeline for the ex.
You always start with the closest people to the victim. If nothing else, you want to eliminate them as suspects before looking into other possibilities.
Investigators know for a fact that Stephen is in the parking lot with Heather just moments before the murder.
Witnesses actually see him get into his car and drive off, which, under normal circumstances, might clear him of suspicion.
The disguise raises an interesting question. Could Stephen have quickly changed and doubled back?
A look into his past reveals more reasons to be suspicious of Stephen Strube.
In 2007, Stephen pleads guilty to burglary and criminal damage to property. He is sentenced to 6 years probation. Then in June of 2008, Stephen pleads guilty to felony theft and earns another 5 years of probation.
Theft and burglary are very different from murder, but it shows a pattern of criminal behavior.
But when investigators question Stephen Strube, he seems legitimately surprised and upset by what happened to his ex-wife.
He says that after dropping off Carson, he drives home to see his girlfriend, not suspecting for a second that his ex-wife is dead.
It's hard to fool seasoned interrogators, and they find Stephen pretty convincing.
While they don't quite eliminate Stephen as a suspect, they move on to the next person on the list.
Joanna answers investigators' questions, but seems less upset than Stephen. Understandable, though, since Joanna and Heather always had a strained relationship.
Joanna tells police that on the day of the murder, she leaves her house around 5:15 or 5:30 and drives to Luthersville, Georgia to visit her parents. On the way, she pulls off Interstate 85 at exit 41, which is over 60 miles from Snellville.
She goes to the post office and then buys a Frosty at Wendy's. She even has a receipt to prove it.
In an unexpected twist, Joanna begins to open up more when talking about Heather.
She says Heather is a bad mother and not fit to raise her grandson.
She claims that when Heather hands Carson over to Stephen, he has dirty diapers and dirt under his fingernails.
Joanna's attitude certainly gets the attention of police, but it's not enough to prove anything other than she didn't like her daughter-in-law. That definitely doesn't make her a killer.
With family interviews taken care of, police turn their attention to the eyewitness descriptions of the shooter. A police artist develops a sketch of the gunman.
The sketch is distributed through the media in the hopes someone will be able to identify the man. But sadly, no one seems to recognize him. Investigators are running into dead end after dead end. This case is getting colder by the hour.
That is, until an unexpected call from a truck driver reveals information that may just break the case wide open. On Wednesday, April 28th, a truck driver named Darryl Myers tells Snellville Police Corporal Dean Boone that he may have seen the man in the sketch at the Target parking lot twice.
The day before the shooting, Darryl Myers is staying at a hotel right next to the Target parking lot.
Darryl Myers has an obstructed view of the parking lot and isn't expecting to see anything out of the ordinary.
While outside having a cigarette, he sees a white Ford F-150 pickup truck with an extended cab drive into the lot and park.
Darryl can't help but notice that the person inside the truck is taking pictures and acting a little odd.
The next day, between 5 and 7 p.m., he sees the same truck.
Seeing a person driving around and acting slightly peculiar could be brushed off as inconsequential, but seeing it twice in 2 days definitely raises suspicion.
He doesn't notice anyone coming out of it, but he does see a suspicious-looking person walking back to it and getting behind the wheel.
The person stares right at Daryl Myers for a moment, and Daryl gets a pretty good look.
Daryl's a decent-sized man, so he's not overly worried about his safety.
Daryl describes the person as wearing a Sonny and Cher type wig and mustache. And he says that when the guy realizes Myers is watching him, he quickly drives away, tires squealing.
Corporal Boone can't help but notice that Daryl Myers' description of the suspicious man sounds a lot like the eyewitness descriptions of the killer.
The timing of when he sees the suspect walking back to the truck is a perfect match for the time of the shooting.
Perhaps most interesting is Daryl's meticulous description of the truck. Being a truck driver himself, he's probably more attuned to noticing the fine details. He's positive it's a white Ford F-150 pickup truck with an extended cab, and even describes the moldings on the side of the truck.
He paints such a clear picture of the truck that for Corporal Dean Boone, it sparks a memory.
It sounds a lot like a truck that Joanna Hayes owns.
Thinking they might be onto something, Corporal Boone asked Daryl to accompany them out to Joanna's place in Lilburn, Georgia.
When they get to Lilburn, they drive down Joanna's street.
Her pickup truck is parked out in the open.
Much to everyone's amazement, it's exactly as Daryl Myers described.
Daryl Myers positively identifies Joanna's truck as the one in the target parking lot. Snellville police impound the vehicle and send it to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for a careful forensic search for trace evidence.
Corporal Boone makes a point of saying they did this without even cracking the doors.
The positive ID of Joanna's truck is intriguing and grounds for a search, but the driver still remains a mystery.
Joanna Hayes is clearly becoming a person of interest, but so far everything they've got is circumstantial. Without any hard evidence, it would be premature to take things further.
Unfortunately for investigators, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation might take weeks to get back to them with results. They can't sit back and wait, so they continue to look for possible leads.
Joanna's alibi is that shortly after the murder, she's 60 miles away in Noonan, buying a Frosty from Wendy's. The detectives are starting to wonder, how long does it take to get there?
With no other significant leads to follow, investigators decide to make the drive from the parking lot in Snellville to the Wendy's in Noonan.
On the day of the murder, the shooter leaves the scene at about 6 p.m. The receipt from Wendy's shows a purchase of 7:19 p.m.
Detectives leave the parking lot at 6 p.m. and drive the speed limit all the way to Wendy's. They arrive at 7:20 p.m.
Taking into consideration slight variations in speed and traffic flow, Joanna could easily be in both places at the right times, but it still doesn't prove anything.
Despite a shaky alibi and a positive ID on Joanna's vehicle, detectives don't have any evidence linking Joanna to Heather's murder. With nothing concrete to go on, investigators think of other ways to catch this killer, and their solution could blow the whole case out of the water. Reviewing the surveillance footage of the killer in the parking lot, detectives begin to think, could this strange man actually not be a man at all?
The hair and beard are obviously fake, and the man appears to be small and slight.
The disguise is almost farcical with the dark, wild wig and large, bushy mustache. It stands out because it's so unnatural looking.
Something about the man's walk seems a little strange, but that's not really a male or female thing.
Focused on the obvious limp from the suspect, It's distinguishable and could easily be used to help find their suspect.
With all the circumstantial evidence piling up against Joanna, detectives need to wonder, could the person in the wig and mustache be her? They get an idea.
In an unorthodox move, they bring in Stephen Strube again to try to get his help. This could either make or break the case based on how he reacts to the new information they're going to share with him.
They don't tell him, but they plan to show him the surveillance video.
Stephen is still technically on the suspect list. They're pretty sure he isn't the person in disguise. For one thing, Stephen is a little too big and manly. But could he be involved?
It's possible that Stephen has had enough with his ex, and to that end, her life could be beneficial for him at this point in time. But if Stephen and his mother are in on it together, showing him the video could be like showing other poker players your cards.
If Stephen's not in on it, would he really turn in his own mother?
It's a calculated risk, but at this point, they feel it's worth it.
Not sure what to expect, they greet him kindly, and then the detectives push play on the video and wait for Stephen's reaction. They hope that Stephen might notice something new, something they might have missed. But even if he does, will he tell?
When he starts watching the video, he has a visible reaction as soon as the suspect is on the screen.
He seems to recognize the person, but at the same time, he can't quite believe it.
It's the walk. The way this person walks. It's very distinctive.
Sort of a stiff-legged, awkward-looking gait with a very wide stride.
You can hide your face with hair and a mustache, but it's harder to change the way your body moves.
Seeing the suspect move like that, it's got to be obvious to Stephen. He knows who that is.
They ask him point blank, "Is that your mom?"
Stephen looks like he might throw up. He can't believe what he's seeing.
They ask him if he will call his mother and try and get her to talk.
It's just like asking an informant to wear a wire. A recording like that would be admissible in court.
Feeling all kinds of emotions, and maybe just wanting to hear her side of it, Stephen agrees to make that call.
Stephen's anxiety is through the roof. He's faced with a life-altering decision, one that could put his own mother behind bars for the rest of her life. But no matter how deeply he loves his mother, he knows he has to do the right thing. After a brief wait, Joanna Hayes answers her phone.
Stephen tells his mom he's seen the surveillance footage of Heather's killer, and that it looks just like her.
Joanna is surprised, and Stephen can't hold in his emotion. He asks his mom straight out, "Why did you do it?"
Of course Joanna denies it, but Stephen presses on, telling her the person on the screen not only looks like her, but the killer walks just like her too.
Overcome by emotion, Stephen pauses, sobbing.
Though Stephen did his best to confront his mom, unfortunately, Joanna Hayes has said nothing incriminating.
The phone call ends with Joanna saying she'd better go and put some clothes on because the police are probably coming to arrest her.
Although this is not an admission of guilt, Joanna knows that if Stephen thinks it could be her in the surveillance footage, then the police likely do too.
Her final comments aside, Joanna hasn't quite given them what they need. They do learn one important thing from the phone call. It's clear to them that in this moment, Stephen Strube believes his mother is guilty.
On Tuesday, August 11th, 2009, the case is going cold, and the media and the community are looking for answers. Will the brazen public murder of Heather Strube ever be solved? So Captain Harold Thomas of the Snellville Police Department makes a statement to the press.
He says they are very close to making an arrest, but are still waiting for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to analyze all of the evidence. It's been a long wait, almost 3 months, but everyone's hopeful it will come soon.
It's a stalling tactic. Police actually have no idea what, if any, information might come back. But when the Georgia Bureau of Investigation finally does send the report to Snellville, it's a bombshell that could close this case for good. Months go by as Snellville police wait for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to run tests on their evidence. They're down to one prime suspect, and they just need one piece of solid evidence to make an arrest. But right now, they have nothing. The case has cooled off considerably, and the killer, whoever they are, still roams free.
After months of waiting, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation returns their findings.
They have found two significant items in Joanna Hayes' truck.
First, there are traces of gunshot residue inside the vehicle. One single particle on the steering wheel and two on the dashboard. They also find a fiber commonly used in wigs.
The odds of both of those things just happening to be in Joanna's truck seem extremely low.
Adding this hard evidence to all the circumstantial evidence already in play, investigators finally have enough to make an arrest.
On Wednesday, October 23, 2009, Joanna Hayes is indicted.
She's arrested in Meriwether County, where she's visiting friends, and transferred to the Gwinnett County Jail later that evening.
Gwinnett County Jail is one of the largest jails in the country, and it's Joanna Hayes' new home until the trial. Since she's been charged with murder, she's segregated with other violent offenders. There's countless official jail rules to abide by while navigating complicated social politics. One misstep, and it'll cost her a beating. The smartest thing she can do is keep her head down and her mouth shut.
She's charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony.
On May 2, 2011, the trial of Joanna Hayes begins, with Gwinnett County Superior Court Judge Warren Davis presiding. Gwinnett County Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney Dan Mayfield paints a picture of a woman trying to commit an almost perfect murder. By posing as a man, donning a wig and fake mustache, and shooting Heather Strube in a seemingly random attack.
They play the recording of the phone conversation between Joanna and her son, Stephen Strube, in which he sounds completely convinced that she's guilty.
In a bizarre twist, Stephen Strube now testifies that he does not believe his mother is guilty. He seems to be suggesting that police influenced his reaction to the video. This is a huge blow to the prosecution.
On May 10, 2009, Joanna's ex-husband, Stephen Strube Sr., takes the stand. Stephen Sr. paints a picture of his tumultuous relationship with a rather difficult Joanna before their inevitable divorce.
He reveals Joanna usually carries a gun in her purse. Then he tells an incredible story.
He says that back in 1991, at a cabin in Meriwether County, he and Joanna get into an argument. Next thing he knows, Joanna pulls out a gun and presses it to his head. She holds it there for several seconds before taking it away.
To make the point clear, the prosecution asks him, where did she point the gun?
Without missing a beat, Stephen Strube Sr. points to the middle of his forehead, which is exactly where Heather Strube was shot. That ends the argument, he says, and marriage. A few days after that, he started divorce proceedings.
A former co-worker of Joanne's, Paul Penzino, takes the stand.
He says that on Valentine's Day, 2008, she tells him about how she would commit the perfect murder.
The timing of Paul's story, around Valentine's Day, is the same time that Joanna mistakenly gave Heather the jewelry receipt revealing Stephen's affair. Is it possible that this seemingly innocent blunder was the first move in her deadly game?
She would act alone, but send her unsuspecting husband or son to buy something with her credit card, thereby setting up an alibi.
On the night of Heather's murder, she uses her credit card to buy a Frosty 60 miles away.
Paul says Joanna explained she'd buy a handgun from a day laborer on a construction site, which she says she's done 3 times before. Afterwards, she would grind the gun down or melt it and then throw it in the lake.
Their murder weapon has never been found, and Joanna has a shop behind her house with tools that could do the job.
She also says she wouldn't use her lime green minivan or dented Dodge truck because they're too noticeable.
Ironically, the only other vehicle she owns is the white Ford F-150 pickup truck, and it leads police right to it.
The story isn't proof of anything, but it's hard to ignore the parallels between Joanna's perfect murder fantasy and Heather Stroob's murder.
The prosecution's case is looking pretty strong at this point. But the most explosive testimony is about to come, from inside the prison walls where Joanna Hayes has been awaiting trial. In their last attempt to seal Joanna Hayes' fate, the prosecution calls their last witness.
An inmate from the Gwinnett County Jail, where Joanna Hayes has been held since her arrest on October 21st, 2009.
It turns out that while Joanna Hayes was being held in Gwinnett County Jail, she did not keep her head down or her mouth shut.
The fellow prisoner testifies that while in jail, Joanna describes Heather as a bad mother with no mothering skills. She says it makes her sick to think of Heather with Carson. Joanna also tells the inmate that she killed Heather by shooting her in the front of the head.
Further testimony suggests that Joanna made her motive very clear to the other inmates.
She says Heather's going to try to keep sole custody of Carson, and that this would tear the family apart. She claims that it's against God's way, and now that Heather's dead, they could be a family.
The inmate testimony positions Joanna and the defense team right where the prosecution wants them to be, between a rock and a hard place.
It's a damning confession.
After the prosecution rests, defense attorney Bruce F. Morris does his best to paint Joanna as wrongfully accused.
He suggests to the jury that all of the eyewitnesses' reports add up to the shooter being a man.
He also claims police targeted Joanna early on and didn't look into alternatives.
He implies that Joanna made the mistake of not seeking a lawyer's help right away because she knew she was innocent.
In the end, the jury does not agree. On Wednesday, May 18, 2011, Joanna Hayes is found guilty of murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm.
Gwinnett County Superior Court Judge Warren Davis sentences Hayes to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
According to parole guidelines, she'll be eligible for release in 30 years.
Judge Davis adds that upon her release, Hayes will be on probation for 5 years. He also orders her to have no contact with most of the prosecution's witnesses and the family of the victim, including her grandson Carson.
Ironically, Joanna Hayes got what she wanted. Heather will never again be able to be a mother to Carson. But it took tearing apart many lives, including her own, to do so. For this grieving family, the one solace is in knowing Carson's mom's killer is behind bars for this heinous crime.
几个人在那边玩，应该是没活干吧，就在那边玩。19自助汽车，这个地方算是古建筑啊。这一品店。贵宾，外机的。这边的话是广西礼铺县，哦，是礼铺市，以前是县，现在改为市了。这么多小狗。这个城市的人气的话也是很一般，县级市，老人的菜，香蕉2块钱。这里面好像是一个市场，真的是。广西这边还有卖老鼠干的。这是卖菜。 卖菜的老阿姨全部躲在这个小巷里面，因为在外面的话会被城管赶走。这菜市场很大。这多少钱？8、10块，4块，4块钱一把。不便宜啊！哇，这么大这个市场。小巷里面卖的油茶、米粉，小吃店。祖传蜜蜂啊，佛教祖传蜜蜂。这小巷里面很繁荣的。回收黄金啊！这小巷里面很多黄金店，你看。 做的黄金店，胡同村啊，首饰加工，小香港一样。物价回升。这个地下室还是菜市场里面，这菜市场这么大。